The sun beat down on the unforgiving desert, its heat shimmering off the endless expanse of sand and sagebrush. Elara, her hands bound by rough rope and her dress caked with dust, stumbled behind the horse of Silas, the scorpion. Her mind was a whirlwind of fear and exhaustion, the distant memory of her comfortable life in Boston now nothing more than a faded dream. She was a captive, a pawn in a game of greed she didn't understand. Silas, a man whose eyes held a cold, predatory gleam, was the leader of a small, vicious gang of outlaws. They had ambushed the stagecoach she was on, leaving chaos and death in their wake. "Keep up, little bird," Silas sneered, his voice a low rasp. "We're not here to wait on a pretty face." Elara's throat was parched, her lips cracked. The relentless march had been going on for days, each one blurring into the next. The other outlaws, a grimy bunch named Jed and a hulking man called Bear, offered nothing but lecherous glances and cruel laughter. Elara clutched at the flimsy cotton of her dress, her only solace the sight of the horizon, however distant and unchanging it seemed. The camp was a miserable huddle of tents in a rock-strewn canyon, hidden from the main trails. As they dismounted, Silas pushed her roughly toward a small, tattered tent. "You'll stay here. Don't try anything stupid." Just as Elara was about to collapse, a sharp, metallic sound cut through the silence, a rifle shot. It was followed by another, and then a rapid succession of shots that echoed off the canyon walls. Jed cried out, a sound of surprise and pain, before hitting the ground. Bear roared in anger, drawing his pistol. Silas grabbed Elara, using her as a human shield. "Show yourself, you coward!" Silas yelled into the canyon's mouth. From the shadows of the rocks emerged a lone figure. He was tall, dressed in a long duster coat that billowed slightly in the arid breeze. A wide-brimmed hat obscured most of his face, but Elara could make out the steely determination in his eyes. He carried a Winchester rifle, its barrel still smoking. "Let the girl go, Silas." The man's voice was low, gravelly, and laced with authority. "You and your kind are done." Silas laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "You think you can take all of us, bounty hunter? Look at her. She's my ticket to freedom." The man didn't flinch. He slowly raised his rifle, the movement deliberate and steady. Silas tightened his grip on Elara, his thumb digging into her back. The air was thick with tension. Suddenly, the man fired. The shot was aimed not at Silas, but at the rope binding Elara's wrists. The rope snapped, and Elara stumbled forward just as a second shot rang out. This time it hit its mark. Silas crumpled, a look of shock on his face as he fell, lifeless. Bear, enraged, charged at the mysterious figure. The man calmly holstered his rifle and drew a revolver with astonishing speed. The two shots that followed were quick and precise. Bear's charge ended abruptly as he fell, a groan escaping his lips before he too was silent. The desert was once again quiet, save for the wind whistling through the rocks. The man walked toward Elara, his spurs jingling with each step. He was a force of nature, a creature of this unforgiving land. He knelt beside her, his gaze intense but not unkind. "Come with me," he said, his voice a low rumble. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She was free, but now she was with a stranger, a man who had just killed two men without a second thought. She looked at his face, seeing the weathered lines around his eyes and the grim set of his jaw. There was a story there, a lifetime of hardship. She swallowed, her fear slowly giving way to a flicker of something else. Hope. She nodded, her trust a leap of faith into the unknown. "My name is Cole," he said, and with that their journey began. The silence was a palpable thing, a blanket of unspoken words between them. Cole rode ahead, a stoic sentinel against the vast, empty landscape. Elara followed on a spare horse, the rhythmic hoofbeats the only sound in the oppressive stillness. Her body ached, and every jolt of the horse sent a jolt of pain through her bruised muscles. The events of the last few days had left her in a state of shock, her mind struggling to process the abrupt shift from captive to, well, she wasn't sure what she was now. A passenger? A burden? She tried to start a conversation, anything to break the tension. "Where are we going?" Cole didn't turn his head. "Tucson. It's the nearest town." His voice was gruff, devoid of emotion. Elara's shoulders slumped. She wanted to know more about him, this man who had saved her. Was he a lawman? A drifter? A feeling of profound loneliness began to settle in. She was free, but she was still utterly alone. They rode for hours, the sun climbing higher in the sky. Elara's thirst became an unbearable torment. She felt lightheaded, her vision blurring. Finally, Cole stopped his horse. He dismounted, and Elara watched as he carefully led his horse to a small, barely visible stream hidden in a cluster of boulders. He took a canteen from his saddlebag and filled it, then walked back to her. "Drink," he said, handing her the canteen. Elara took it greedily, the cool water a small taste of heaven. She drank until her thirst was slaked, then handed it back. "Thank you," she whispered. Cole nodded and returned to his horse. He pulled out a piece of jerky and a hard biscuit, offering her half. "It's not much, but it'll do." As they ate in silence, Elara watched him. His movements were precise and economical, a man who had learned to survive with nothing but his wits and his gun. She noticed a long, thin scar that ran down his cheekbone, a testament to a life of conflict. "You're a bounty hunter," she said, more of a statement than a question. "I am," he replied, his gaze fixed on the horizon. Silas had a price on his head. "So you were just doing your job?" Cole's jaw tightened. "It's more complicated than that." He didn't elaborate. Elara didn't push. She could sense his reluctance to talk, a wall he had built around himself. But for the first time since her abduction, she felt a flicker of safety. This man, for all his gruffness, was her protector. As the sun began to set, casting long purple shadows over the desert, Cole found a small overhang of rock. He built a fire and handed her a blanket. "Rest," he said. "We'll be on the move before dawn." As Elara lay down, wrapped in the coarse blanket, she watched him. He sat by the fire, a solitary figure, his eyes scanning the darkness. She saw not just a rugged cowboy, but a man burdened by something heavy and unseen. He was her rescuer, but his journey, she realized, was far from over. And now, for better or worse, she was a part of it. The days melted into a series of endless rides and quiet nights. Elara's initial fear of Cole had been replaced by a cautious curiosity. She began to notice the small things, the way he always gave her the best portion of their meager food, how he positioned himself to shield her from the wind at night, the way his hand instinctively went to his revolver at the slightest sound. His silence was not born of indifference, she realized, but of a deep-seated reserve. One evening, as they were sharing a can of beans over a crackling fire, Elara decided to try again. "Why did you choose this life, Cole?" He stirred the beans with a small spoon. "It wasn't a choice, not really. It was just... what happened?" "What happened?" She pressed gently. Cole hesitated, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "I was a lawman, back in Texas. Had a good life. A wife. A son." His voice was low, filled with an ache that was almost physical. "Then a gang of outlaws came through. I wasn't there. I was out on patrol. By the time I got back, they were gone. I left the badge behind that day. Now I just hunt the men who prey on others." Elara's heart went out to him. The pain in his eyes was raw and real. She understood his stoicism now. It was a shield against the grief that still haunted him. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice barely a whisper. He looked at her, and for the first time, she saw a flicker of vulnerability in his guarded expression. "It's a long time ago. But some things, they don't ever really leave you. She reached out and placed her hand gently on his arm. Your son would be proud of you, Cole. You're doing good now. A muscle in his jaw twitched. He didn't pull away. He just looked at her hand, then at her eyes. In that moment, the distance between them seemed to shrink, replaced by a profound, unspoken understanding. The next day, as they rode, Elara felt a change in their dynamic. The silence was no longer heavy with tension, but comfortable and companionable. She began to tell him about her life in Boston, about her dreams of becoming a schoolteacher, her love for books and the sea. He listened, not with his usual impassive politeness, but with a quiet, genuine interest. He even laughed once, a low, rumbling sound that startled them both. They were no longer just two strangers on a perilous journey. They were two people, broken by life, finding a strange and unexpected comfort in each other's presence. The sky turned a sickly yellow, and the wind began to howl, kicking up a fine, stinging dust. Cole's head snapped up, his gaze scanning the horizon. Sandstorm's coming, and a bad one. He urged his horse into a frantic gallop, leading Elara toward a cluster of large red rock formations. We need to find shelter, now! He yelled over the rising roar of the wind. The sandstorm hit them with the force of a tidal wave. The wind shrieked, visibility dropped to zero, and the stinging sand felt like 1,000 tiny needles against their skin. They dismounted and stumbled forward, a hand clasped firmly around their horses' reins, until they found a small cave, barely big enough for all three of them. Inside, the roar of the storm was muffled, but the air was thick with dust. Cole found a small crevice and used his pocket-knife to pry a few pieces of flint from the rock. He used a piece of fabric and his knife to spark a small fire. The dancing flames provided a welcome source of light and warmth. Elara shivered, wrapping her arms around her knees. The ordeal had left her exhausted and frightened. "Are we safe here?" she asked, her voice trembling. "As safe as we can be," Cole replied, his eyes scanning the entrance of the cave. "This storm could last for days." He tended to the horses, giving them some of their precious water before sitting down across from her. The small space forced a proximity they hadn't shared before. Elara could feel the warmth radiating from his body. She looked at him, truly looked at him in the firelight. His face, normally a mask of stoicism, was etched with worry. He had a small cut on his cheek from a stray piece of gravel. "You're bleeding," she said softly. He touched his cheek, then shrugged. "It's nothing." Elara reached into her satchel, pulling out a small handkerchief. "It's not nothing. It could get infected." She carefully dabbed at the cut, her fingers brushing against his skin. She felt a jolt, an electric current that passed between them. Cole didn't move, his eyes fixed on hers. "You're a doctor?" he asked, his voice low. "No, just a schoolteacher. I learned some first aid." She finished and looked up at him. "Thank you for saving me, Cole, really." He finally broke their gaze, looking into the fire. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because it's what's right." But Elara knew it was more than that. It was an act of humanity, a small act of kindness in a world that had taken so much from him. The storm raged outside, but inside the cave, a different kind of calm had settled over them. They were two lost souls, finding refuge not just from the storm, but in each other. The storm finally abated, leaving behind a world transformed. The desert floor was scoured clean, the rocks and mountains looking sharp and new, but the quiet was broken by something that made Cole's blood run cold. Hoofprints. They were fresh, and there were many of them. "They're on our trail," Cole said, his voice grim. "The rest of Silas's gang. They found his body and now they're coming for us." Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Elara. She had been so focused on survival, on the immediate dangers, that she had forgotten the men who had been with Silas. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice tight with panic. "We ride fast," Cole said, his face a mask of grim determination. "We can't let them catch us out in the open." They mounted their horses and galloped across the newly smoothed terrain. The sense of urgency was a palpable thing. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs, every gust of wind sounding like a whisper of their pursuers. Cole was a different man now, his quiet stoicism replaced by a fierce, focused intensity. He was no longer just a protector, he was a hunter. After a few hours, they stopped to rest their horses in a small, hidden gorge. Cole dismounted and began to scan the horizon with a pair of worn field glasses. "They're close," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "They're better trackers than I thought." Elara's stomach was a knot of fear. "Can we outrun them?" "Maybe," he replied, his gaze fixed on a distant cloud of dust. "But I don't think that's the answer. This is my fight, Elara, not yours. I can lead them away. You take my horse and go straight to Tucson." "No," she said, her voice firm. "I'm not leaving you. We're in this together, Cole." He turned to face her, his eyes blazing. "You don't understand. These men, they're killers. They'll show no mercy." "Neither will I," she said, her voice gaining a strength she didn't know she had. "I'm not the same person I was when they took me. You've taught me how to be strong. We're a team." A flicker of surprise crossed Cole's face, followed by a small, almost imperceptible smile. He nodded slowly. "All right. A team." He then laid out a plan to use the harsh terrain against their pursuers, to ambush them and end this chase once and for all. The ambush was set in a narrow, rocky pass. Cole had positioned them on a high ridge, their horses hidden behind a cluster of boulders. They waited in the suffocating silence, the only sound the pounding of their own hearts. Elara had a pistol now, a small but heavy Colt revolver Cole had given her, teaching her how to hold it steady, how to aim. She clutched it, her knuckles white. After what felt like an eternity, they saw them. 3 riders, their faces grim and their clothes dusty, rode into the pass below. They were the remnants of Silas's gang, a collection of desperados and killers, led by a man with a scarred face named Rourke. "This is it," Cole whispered, his hand on the butt of his revolver. Rourke's horse suddenly reared, the man holding up a hand. "Wait," he said, his voice echoing off the rocks. "I smell a rat, or rather, a rat's nest." Cole cursed under his breath. They had been discovered. He stood, raising his rifle. "Rourke, it's over. Leave now, and you can ride away." Rourke laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Not before I get what I came for, bounty hunter. You killed Silas, and I'm going to watch you die." The sound of gunfire erupted, a cacophony of shots that ricocheted off the rocks. Cole returned fire, his aim precise and deadly. One of Rourke's men cried out and fell from his horse. Elara, her hands trembling, raised her pistol and fired. She missed, but the shot startled another outlaw's horse, causing it to bolt. Cole was taking on 2 men at once, but Rourke was a seasoned fighter. He dismounted, using the rocks for cover, and began to circle. Elara watched in horror as Cole was forced to move, a shot grazing his arm. "Cole!" she screamed. "Stay down!" He yelled back, his voice strained. Rourke took his opportunity, firing a shot that caught Cole in the shoulder. Cole gasped, stumbling back against the rock face, his rifle clattering to the ground. Rourke stepped out from behind his cover, a cruel smile on his face. He raised his pistol, aiming it at Cole's head. Elara's mind went blank. She wasn't a schoolteacher, she wasn't from Boston, she was just a woman with a gun, facing the man who was about to kill the man who had saved her. Her fear was gone, replaced by a cold, righteous fury. She steadied her trembling hands, took a deep breath and aimed. Not at Rourke's head, but at his leg. The shot was loud and clear, and it hit its mark. Rourke cried out, his knee giving out as he fell to the ground. His pistol flew from his hand, skittering across the dust. Cole, gritting his teeth in pain, lunged forward, grabbing his rifle. He brought the butt of the rifle down on Rourke's head, ending the fight with a swift final blow. The last remaining outlaw, seeing his leader defeated, turned and fled, disappearing into the vastness of the desert. Silence returned to the pass, heavy with the smell of gunpowder and blood. Elara ran to Cole, who was leaning against the rock, his face pale with pain. "You're hurt," she said, her voice thick with concern. "I've had worse," he said, a weary smile on his lips. You saved me." She looked at the pistol in her hand, still smoking faintly. "We're a team, remember?" And in the silence of the pass, amidst the echoes of a violent past, two people, once strangers, now shared a bond, forged in fire, and a testament to the strength found in mutual trust and protection. Cole's wound was serious, and their journey slowed to a crawl. Elara became his nurse, tending to his wound, changing the bandages and helping him on and off his horse. She was no longer a victim, but a caretaker, her hands gentle and her heart filled with a protective love she hadn't known was there. He, in turn, allowed himself to lean on her, to accept her care. His stoic facade was gone, replaced by a quiet vulnerability that she found more endearing than anything he could have said. As they neared Tucson, the landscape began to change. The harsh desert gave way to patches of green, and the occasional farmhouse appeared on the horizon. The sight of civilization brought a mix of relief and anxiety. Their shared world, their bubble of two, was about to be broken. One evening, as they sat by the fire, a comfortable silence stretching between them, Cole broke the quiet. "We'll be in Tucson by tomorrow morning. I'll get you a train ticket back to Boston. You'll be safe there." Elara's heart sank. She had been so focused on getting him better, on their journey, that she hadn't considered the end. "And what about you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I'll go on. There are always more jobs." She shook her head. No, Cole, you can't. Not anymore. This life, it's killing you." She gestured to his wound, to the haunted look in his eyes. "You've done enough. You've atoned. It's time to stop." He looked at her, his eyes filled with a conflict she recognized. "I don't know any other life, Elara. This is all I have." "No," she said, reaching out and taking his hand. "You have me, and I'm not letting you go." He held her hand tightly, his thumb stroking the back of hers. "Elara, I'm a mess. I've got nothing. No home, no family, just a past full of ghosts." "And I have nothing," she said, her voice filled with conviction. "I lost everything when they took me, but I'm not afraid anymore. Not with you. We can build a new life, Cole, here, in this place, away from your past, away from my old life." He looked at her, his eyes glistening in the firelight. For the first time, he let the wall down completely. "Elara, come with me," she said, a small, tearful smile on her face. "Not to a new job, not to another fight. Come with me, and let's find a new path together." He didn't say anything, but he squeezed her hand, a silent promise. Tucson was a bustling, dusty town, a stark contrast to the vast emptiness of the desert. As they rode into the main street, Elara felt a wave of relief. She had made it, but the sight of the train station, its tracks leading east, brought a pang of loss. This was where their journey was supposed to end. They found a doctor to tend to Cole's wound, a kind, elderly man who clucked his tongue at Cole's stoicism. "You're lucky, son. A few inches to the left, and you'd be a dead man." Cole simply grunted in response. While Cole rested, Elara walked the town, marveling at the sights and sounds she had taken for granted before her ordeal. The general store, the saloon, the steady stream of people. She bought a new dress, a simple cotton one, and for the first time in weeks she felt like herself again. But as she looked at her reflection, She saw a new person, a woman with calloused hands and a fierce spirit, a woman who was no longer running from a terrible past, but walking toward a future. She returned to the hotel room where Cole was resting. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands. He looked up when she entered, his eyes filled with a familiar turmoil. "I can't ask you to stay here, Elara," he said, his voice raw. "This is a rough place. You deserve to go back to your life." She sat beside him, taking his hand. "My life is here, Cole. It's with you. It's what we've built, out there in the desert. You may not have a home, but you are my home, and I'm not leaving." He finally broke. He wrapped his arms around her, holding her tightly, burying his face in her shoulder. His body shook with a grief and a relief so profound, it stole his breath. "I'm so tired, Elara," he whispered. "I'm so tired of fighting." "I know," she said, stroking his hair. "I know, but you don't have to fight anymore. You can rest. I'm here now." That night, they made a decision. They would stay in Tucson. Cole, with his vast knowledge of the land, found a job as a guide for new settlers. Elara, with her love of books, found a position as a tutor for the children of the town's prominent families. They rented a small cabin on the outskirts of town, its walls rough and its roof leaky, but it was theirs. It was the start of their new life. Their life in Tucson was not a whirlwind of romance, but a slow, steady burn of shared experiences. Cole, who had been a man of action, now found joy in the simple rhythm of their days. He would leave at dawn, his horse a familiar sight, and return at dusk, the dust of the trail on his boots. He was still a man of few words, but his silence was now filled with a quiet contentment. He would sit with Elara by the fire, just listening to her talk about her day, about the children she was teaching, about the books she was reading. Elara's students were a motley crew of ranchers' and merchants' children, their minds hungry for knowledge. She found immense satisfaction in her work, a new purpose that had nothing to do with her past. But her true happiness was found in the small moments with Cole. The way he would bring her a wildflower he found on the trail, the way he would look at her across the dinner table, his eyes filled with an unspoken affection. Their relationship was a delicate thing, built on trust and a profound respect for each other's strength. There were no grand gestures, no declarations of love, just the quiet understanding that they were in this together, a bond forged in hardship and cemented in the quiet moments of their new life. One evening, after a particularly hard day of guiding a difficult group of settlers, Cole came home exhausted. He sat at the table, his head in his hands. Elara came up behind him, her hands on his shoulders, gently massaging the tension out of his muscles. "It was a bad day?" she asked softly. "Just a hard day," he replied, his voice tired. "But it's better now. I'm home." He looked up at her, a profound look of peace on his face. He reached for her hand, pulling her into his lap. He held her close, her head against his chest. She could feel the steady beat of his heart. It wasn't the wild beat of a warrior's heart, but the calm, steady rhythm of a man who had found his place in the world. And she knew then, with a certainty that reached into her very soul, that this was their redemption. Months turned into a year. Their little cabin was no longer a temporary shelter, but a home. They had a small garden, a few chickens, and a dog that followed Cole everywhere. The ghosts of the past were not forgotten, but they no longer haunted them. They were just stories, lessons learned, a testament to the journey that had led them to this moment. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a fiery orange and purple glow across the sky, they sat on the porch of their cabin, a silence of perfect contentment between them. "I still can't believe it sometimes," Elara said, her hand resting on his arm, "that a rugged cowboy would come to my rescue and stay." Cole smiled, a rare, genuine smile that lit up his eyes. "You were the one who saved me, Elara, from the life I was living. You gave me something to fight for that wasn't a paycheck or a past full of ghosts." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small silver locket. It was plain, unadorned, but to Elara it was the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. "I had this made for you, in town. It's for you to remember our journey." She opened the locket, and inside there were two small, carefully placed items, a single smooth river stone and a tiny, faded piece of leather. "The stone from the stream and a piece of the rope you used to be bound with," he said, his voice soft. "A reminder of how far we've come, and that we can get through anything together." Tears welled in Elara's eyes. She closed the locket and held it tightly in her hand. "You were right, Cole. It was more than a job. It was a rescue of two people in the middle of nowhere who needed each other more than they knew." He turned to her, his eyes filled with a love so profound it took her breath away. He gently cupped her face in his hands, his thumbs stroking her cheeks. "Come with me," he said, his voice a low, beautiful rumble, echoing the words he had spoken to her a year ago. "Where?" she whispered, her heart full. "To a new horizon," he said, and he leaned in and kissed her. It was not a kiss born of passion, but of a quiet, enduring love. The kiss of two souls who had been lost but had finally, against all odds, found their way home, together. The sun set on the horizon, painting the sky with a masterpiece of color. And in the quiet of their porch, Elara and Cole watched it set, knowing that with every sunset there would be a new sunrise and a new day of their beautiful, hard-won life together.